This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans, it's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. On January 4th, 1999, World Championship Wrestling found a way to shoot itself in the foot, not once but twice in the same night. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments presents Anatomy of a Disaster, the Fingerpoke of Doom. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. It was the first Nitro of 1999 and WCW needed a win. While the company had enjoyed incredible success in 1996, 1997, and even 1998, it was beginning to face increased competition from the WWF, which at one point seemed to be on the brink of reverting to becoming a territory or even folding. The WWF had adopted its Attitude Era style of programming, booking more adult-themed content where the line between babyfaces and heels was blurred, more adult content aired, that is, harsher language and more sex appeal, and the WWF featured more violence. This resulted in more fans tuning into the WWF's Monday Night Show, and Raw was beginning to win the head-to-head ratings battle that WCW had dominated for so long. That's not to say that WCW was down and out. According to writer Shaun, WCW was looking good in 1998. In early November, WCW was well on its way to having a record year. Ratings had doubled, and with 23 straight sellouts, the company was on pace to post a $55 million profit on $200 million in revenues. There was even talk about a series of primetime specials for NBC to fill in for the striking NBA. These specials could have been huge for WCW, as it would have given the promotion more exposure. Years earlier, the WWF had utilized its late-night program, Saturday Night's Main Event, to expand its audience. For more on Saturday Night's Main Event, see our video, Saturday Night's Main Event, the WWF's Secret Weapon. WCW's Eric Bischoff was confident that a primetime special could do even more for the company. For now, though, it was time to get the new year off to a strong start by utilizing its incredible roster of talent and its still strong Monday night show, Nitro. The January 4th episode of Nitro was a chance to deal with WCW's difficulties battling the WWF in the ratings department. Some critics argued that WCW's creative minds were slipping, especially following December 27, 1998 Starrcade and its main event. The heavily promoted match saw Kevin Nash snap Bill Goldberg's undefeated streak in a shocking fashion, both literally and figuratively. Nash would get an assist from Scott Hall, who showed up with a stun gun in hand and shot Goldberg into oblivion. The finish was not well received, but WCW seemed to make up for it by booking a rematch between Goldberg and Kevin Nash at the Georgia Dome on the first Nitro of 1999. The Georgia Dome was the same venue where Bill Goldberg had defeated Hollywood Hulk Hogan for the WCW Championship. Could lightning strike twice? The Fingerpoke heard round the world. Nearly 40,000 fans attended the January 4th show. A reminder that WCW was still doing good business, despite increased competition from the WWF. However, WCW decided to throw a curveball, as Bill Goldberg was removed from the match after he was arrested. And what was Bill's crime? Miss Elizabeth had sworn out a complaint alleging Goldberg was stalking her. As a result, the match between Goldberg and Nash was changed to Hollywood Hulk Hogan challenging Nash for the title. The Hogan vs. Nash match was the culmination of a feud between the former friends. Hogan and Nash, along with Scott Hall, founded the New World Order, NWO, but internal dissension led to each wrestler forming their own version of the New World Order. Now, Nash was prepared to defend the title he'd won from Bill Goldberg in controversial fashion at Starrcade. Meanwhile, fans saw that Miss Elizabeth admitted that she'd set up Goldberg and the charge was baseless. Now freed, Goldberg raced to the arena to get his rematch with Nash. Back at the Georgia Dome, Hogan and Nash squared off against each other. While this wasn't the Goldberg vs. Nash match the fans had been promised, it had potential. That is, until it became obvious that the match was a sham. The book The Death of WCW describes the debacle that fans witnessed. Hogan touched Nash in the chest with one finger, and Nash took this enormous bump like he'd been hit with a cannonball. On the bright side, it was probably the biggest bump Nash would take all year. Hogan covered him and won the belt. Afterward, Hogan and Nash hugged, revealing that it had been a setup all along. Goldberg finally arrived and laid waste to everyone in the ring until being attacked by his newest foe, the old, immobile, washed-up Lex Luger. It was a terrible call, and fans were understandably enraged. Fans threw garbage into the ring to show their disgust, much as they had when Hulk Hogan turned heel and joined the Outsiders at 1996's Bash at the Beach. Unlike that night, the fans' disdain didn't appear directed at the NWO, so much as it was directed at WCW for booking this monstrosity, Tony Schiavone's infamous call. However, as bad as the Fingerpoke of Doom was, WCW did itself even more harm thanks to another boneheaded move. The WWF was airing a pre-taped episode of Raw, and Eric Bischoff told Tony Schiavone to spoil Raw's main event. This was nothing new, as WCW capitalized on it whenever the WWF pre-taped Raw. Schiavone went to work, telling fans, don't even think about changing the channel, because we've learned that at our competition, Mick Foley, who used to wrestle here as Cactus Jack, is going to win their world title. Talk about putting butts in the seats. Unfortunately for WCW, many of its fans decided to switch over to the WWF and watch Mick Foley capture his first world title. Foley had always been a fan darling, and for Foley fans, this was a well-deserved accomplishment. Consequently, hundreds of thousands of viewers, the typical figure is given at around 600,000, changed the channel to watch Foley's big win. While the narrative has often been written as Bischoff doing what he had always been doing for years, that is, spoiling the results of pre-taped Raws, Shaun Assael notes in his book, Sex, Lies, and Headlocks, the real story of Vince McMahon and World Wrestling Entertainment, that Bischoff's call to spoil Raw that night was a result of him getting a taste of his own medicine after advance word about the finish had leaked out and was posted on the internet. Although the Raw match had been taped on December 29, 1998 in Worcester, Massachusetts, McMahon did his voiceovers live. Seeing a delicious chance to tweak Turner, he told Jim Ross to announce over the air that Nash was going to lay down and hand the belt to Hogan on TNT. Bischoff, who always monitored both shows from backstage, lost his composure when he heard that. Grabbing a headset, he screamed at his own play-by-play man, Tony Schiavone, to retaliate by telling their audience that Mick Foley was about to win the WWF's title from The Rock. Tony Schiavone wasn't thrilled about making the call, but he had a job to do. According to Mick Foley, Schiavone's call upset him, so much that Mick called Tony Schiavone. As Foley recalls, I actually waited until the ratings came out, until I called Tony Schiavone, and I just left a purposely very forlorn message saying, "Listen, it's Mick Foley. I heard what you said. I honestly don't know why you guys would do that to somebody who worked so hard for so long for your company. And in truth, it probably just hurt your ratings. But anyway, I just thought I'd say hello." It's often been said that the best revenge is massive success, and Foley's title win, coupled with Raw's ratings win, certainly encouraged Foley after Schiavone spoiled the results. As for Schiavone, Foley recalls, Tony ended up calling me back, and my wife answered the phone. She came to me and said, "It's Tony Schiavone, and he sounds really sad." I knew as soon as he made that comment on air that it was probably put in his ear by Bischoff. Tony and I had a nice little conversation, but honestly, I'm not bitter towards the players of that evening because it all combined to make for the best possible scenario. Foley's title win proved to be a big rallying point for the WWF, and WCW's blunder in spoiling the win showed that WCW was no longer bulletproof. However, how much was the Fingerpoke of Doom responsible for WCW's downfall? Two common misconceptions. As Guy Evans notes in Nitro, the incredible rise and inevitable collapse of Ted Turner's WCW, there are two often overlooked points about the Fingerpoke of Doom. The first is that WCW was solely to blame for viewers tuning into Raw. Evans claims WWF.com spoiled the title change. Furthermore, Nitro saw an increase in ratings at the tail end of the show, despite viewers tuning in to watch Mick Foley win his first WWF championship. That was cold comfort as Raw won the ratings that night, pulling in 5.76 to Nitro's 4.96. Worse, Nitro would never win a ratings battle again against Raw, other than when Raw was preempted. For some fans and observers, the Fingerpoke of Doom was the last nail in the coffin for WCW. However, was the Fingerpoke of Doom a bad idea, or was it a case of poor execution? It's worth reminding that the WWF had its own version of the Fingerpoke of Doom. In 1997, D-Generation X was making life miserable for WWF Commissioner Sergeant Slaughter, so Sarge did as he saw fit, booking a match between Shawn Michaels and Triple H for the European Championship. Michaels held the WWF Championship and the European Championship at the time. Slaughter warned Michaels that he'd be stripped of the European title if he refused to wrestle his friend Triple H. Michaels agreed, but fans got anything but a match. The two worked a condensed version of the Larry Zbyszko 11-minute stall before locking up. Michaels crumbled to the mat as Triple H ran the ropes several times while the Heartbreak Kid was apparently KO'd. Hunter uncovered Michaels for an easy 3 count, and despite Michaels crying that he'd lost the title, it was clear that everyone had been bamboozled by D-Generation X. Despite this silly swerve, it's never received much criticism, and in hindsight, it's easy to understand why. This was a comedy bit designed to show DX outsmarting Commissioner Slaughter. More importantly, it was over a secondary title, the WWF European Championship. The Fingerpoke of Doom was for WCW's top title, and it angered fans who wanted to see Goldberg get his much-deserved rematch. Did the Fingerpoke of Doom seal WCW's fate? Was this much-derided angle the beginning of the end for WCW? For some observers, the storyline epitomized the troubled company's fall from grace. For others, it was a booking decision that, in hindsight, could have been handled differently, but one that played little, if any, role in WCW's eventual bankruptcy. Eric Bischoff doesn't believe the Fingerpoke of Doom sealed WCW's doom. In fact, Bischoff claims there were several turning points. It was not one, and they certainly weren't creative turning points. That's just bullshizzle, wrestling dirt site nonsense. The real turning point was in mid-1998 when I was told, "You are no longer going to use the formula that got you to the dance. You are no longer going to use the formula that almost put Vince McMahon out of business. You're going to become family friendly. You're going to abandon the creative formula that's working so well, and you're going to adopt a new formula that's going to make us family friendly." Kevin Nash seems to think the angle was blown out of proportion. The Fingerpoke of Doom was nothing. The Fingerpoke of Doom was just trying to realign the NWO to face off with Goldberg, but Goldberg ended up getting injured. I love how the story of my life is how I beat Goldberg to turn around and take the Fingerpoke of Doom a week later. Boy, that did me a lot of good. When you look at how people perceive the whole thing, it's ridiculous. Nash believes the real momentum shift arose from the WWF's booking of WrestleMania 14 and Mike Tyson's role in the event. When Tyson came to WrestleMania, Vince knew that everybody was going to be watching that WrestleMania. They put a movie trailer quality piece before every match that caught everybody up to date if you hadn't been watching the show every week. It got a great buy rate. When I watched that WrestleMania, I said, "We're dead in the water." That's what changed wrestling. Wrestling's Greatest Moments knows it's impossible to explain the many reasons for WCW's demise and the different theories on what led to it, at least as part of one video. However, it's impossible to ignore the role poor storytelling played. Even if WCW collapsed due to circumstances beyond its control, that is, the theory that the AOL-Time Warner merger meant WCW was living on borrowed time as executives wanted to dump wrestling, there's no escaping the fact that bad storytelling and booking led to WCW viewers leaving in droves. WCW might have been able to make a case for itself if the ratings were still strong. The Fingerpoke of Doom was one of many bad decisions from WCW's creative team, but it symbolized that the glory days were over. In 1999, Dave Meltzer wrote about the Fingerpoke of Doom, explaining why this particular storyline was flawed. The idea is to recreate 1996 to 1997, because that's when the company caught fire. Hope they remember another key of that period was they were presenting incredible matches on television and signed nearly every great young wrestler in the world, and were blowing their opposition away in the ring, something that is far from the case today. And what if that NBC special? According to Eric Bischoff, WCW executives dilly-dallied in getting back to NBC, In his memoir, Controversy Creates Cash, Eric Bischoff discussed where things went awry. Bischoff presented the opportunity to Harvey Schiller. Unfortunately, Harvey was no longer in a position to make that kind of decision on his own. He had to take it to a committee of Turner execs. I got a call back right after the first of the year from ad sales. I was told, yeah, that's a great opportunity, but we don't want to do it. Ad sales, ad sales. They apparently felt that by putting our brand on NBC, we would put Turner salespeople at some kind of disadvantage. While there's no guarantee whether one or more primetime specials could have helped WCW, it's a what if for fans to speculate about, and another reminder of just how poorly WCW was being operated. In hindsight, the Fingerpoke of Doom was just one of many poor decisions that led to WCW's collapse. Regardless of whether you view it as a turning point in WCW's downfall, or just one of many small steps into the abyss, it's become a symbol for WCW's shift from the hottest promotion in wrestling to a piece of wrestling history. Do you remember WCW's infamous Fingerpoke of Doom? Do you think this was the last nail in WCW's coffin? Or has its impact on the Monday Night War been overrated? Share your thoughts in the comment section and let us know if there's any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.